they're in when they were younger, then there's a risk that they would go on to have disadvantaged lives after that. And they were looking at different areas. Transport was only one area they're looking at. They were looking at education and employment, other areas, but they identified, particularly through speaking with young people, that transport was a particular concern of young people that they raised themselves. So this project was part of a wider look at what's needed to enable successful lives for young people. So at the end of our 3-year project, we produced a report. This report, Why We Shouldn't Ignore the Transport Needs of Young People. And we were particularly aiming to influence policymakers in the UK for them to take notice of our work. It was a report that brings together evidence that we obtained, but it also had policy recommendations. So it's not a typical research report that we do in universities. It's particularly aimed at policymakers to make them sort of stand up and listen and do something about this issue. Yeah, I think we've had some successes since the report was issued. It's always a bit difficult to tell, but I'm quite optimistic that we have made some difference in the year since we published this report. And I'll now just summarise the contents of our report. So just to let you know, before I'll focus on the findings, but just to let you know what the basis for our report was, we used a combination of some very large data sets and smaller data sets, but with more details. So we looked at the National Travel Survey, which is very useful data source in England, with large numbers of respondents across the whole age span, but it includes sufficient numbers of young people for us to be able to get a good picture of the situation for young people. So as about 800 people for every in every age year was available to us over a 5-year period. On the other end of the scale, we did for in-depth interviews with a small group of young people immediately before and after leaving education. So these were around the age of 17 to 18 years of old. And we interviewed young people in different locations, in urban locations, in rural locations, across the south, west, and north of the UK. We're also in partnering with Sustrans. They had some very useful information about the active travel situation for young people as well. So I'm going to present 4 key findings from the report, which I think are sort of important lessons to take away. The first one is that young people travel less than other age groups, and the gap is widening. Now, I don't know whether this is the same situation elsewhere in Europe. I would expect that it probably is similar to the situation. So that young people aged 16 to 24 make 14% fewer trips compared to the population average. And compared to working age people, 25 to 64-year ages, 21% fewer trips. And this gap in trip making has widened over the last 20 years, which I'll show you now. I'll just show you a chart which illustrates this. You can see here from this chart the number of trips per year per person and how that's changed over time. And we've got the situation for 16 to 24-year-olds with the red line, and you can see that line is lower than the lines for the other age groups, or the overall population and working age people. It's lower, and also the gap you can see how it's increased a little bit over time. And of course, we can see at the end of this period here, you can see through the pandemic how trip rates dropped in particular. We also looked at those young people who have a low numbers of trips, and we looked at their characteristics, and we found that young people with a low level of trip making, perhaps they're making no trips during the 7-day diary where we have data. We found that was associated with economic inactivity. So those who are not in work, and not studying either. We also found it was associated with low income, and it was also independently associated with lack of car access. So it looks like we don't know the cause and effect relationship here, but it looks concerning that it's yet those young people with disadvantages are particularly making a low number of trips. And young people are making fewer trips in total, but there's one mode of well, when you look at private transport, public transport, and active travel, it's public transport where young people are making more use of that than other age groups. So much so that 2 in 5 young people say that they rely on public transport. So whilst they're making fewer trips in general, public transport is particularly important to young people. The next second of our key findings is that the availability and cost of transport are limiting factors for young people. We saw evidence that young people are often prevented from taking up valuable opportunities, such as work experience, due to their inability to be able to get to the places to have this work experience or to take up a job or for education and training. And other research I've been involved in has shown that lack of car access or lack of good public transport has shown to be linked to poorer life opportunities, lower chance of getting a job, for example. So this is having this barrier to these opportunities. But even where young people do have good public transport options, we saw that young people are frustrated with the cost of public transport and the impact that has on their disposable income, the income they have to use for other things. And they refer to it reducing their self-esteem, making them less inclined to look for economic and social opportunities. And I've got one quote here from our interviews. This is from a male participant looking and talking about how the transport situation was affecting their ability to take up a job in a career area that they would like to in IT. And that their experience was that the potential employer was worried that they did not have a driving license, and that the employer thought that if this young person relied on buses, they would not be able to get to the job very reliably, and they implied that this young person would need to be able to get a driving license and a car to be able to take up this job. Our next finding is now moves on to looking at the young people's use of different transport modes. And what the picture we see is that young people in the age 16 to 24, their transport needs are changing fast as they get older, as they move from education into work, other opportunities. And they also rely upon a mixture of different transport modes. We found that 21% of 16 to 24-year-olds use a combination of private, public, and active transport modes. They use all of those in a week, compared to only 15% of the overall population. And you can see this with this chart here. So the colours indicate different combinations of transport modes, and you can see this for different age groups. The dark green are those people that use all three of private, public, and active transport modes, and this is observed over a 7-day period from the National Travel Survey. We can see here that young people are, like I said, using a greater combination of transport modes. And if you look at the pink, that's those people only using private transport modes, and you can see that's less common amongst young people. In general, what you can see, particularly if you look at 15 to 20-year-olds, how you can see that they're featuring in all those different color bands. You can see a greater mixture of colors appearing there because they're using a greater variety of different transport modes. Then we finally we were emphasised that active travel and public transport are key for young people's basic mobility. In England and the UK, young people with driving licence has reduced over recent decades. This is work that I've been involved with, looking at the reasons behind that. Whatever the reasons, though, the situation is that fewer young people have driving licenses and car access than used to be the case. There's been a big change since the peak in the 1990s in the UK. So young people need alternative transport modes, but they told us they need modes which give them control, flexibility, and speed. They need these modes to be effective for them. Access to good walking, cycling, public transport then options is vital then to help young people access education and employment opportunities. And we saw reasonable use of walking and public transport. We saw in England actually very low levels of cycling. And I guess that's not the focus of this today, where we're focusing on public transport. But that was a concern that we saw, that there was very limited use of cycling in England, and that cycling potentially could offer that control, flexibility, and speed the young people are looking for and are currently struggling to manage. So our recommendations are: we need to ensure the needs of young people are better recognised in transport planning. That involves engaging with young people, listening to their needs, as we did in our project, where we had young people were advisors to our project and discussed our results, findings, and recommendations with us. Apart from engaging young people, the basic system for walking, cycling, public transport needs to be good for young people as well as other age groups. So that need for long-term dedicated investment is emphasised, given the needs of young people as well as other groups. But young people could do with some particularly special help to enable them to walk, cycle, use public transport, and new emerging shared mobility systems, such as what we're going to hear about subsequently from the other presenters. And I've just got one particular recommendation that we made. We did also in our project look separately at bus fares for young people, because buses are the main public transport mode used by young people in the UK. We did a survey of bus fares across the UK. You can see the map up there, which shows that there is a very varied picture for young people and whether they get any reductions in bus fares. In Scotland, in recent years, they've introduced free bus travel for under 22-year-olds across the whole of Scotland. London has a good offer, a free offer as well, and Greater Manchester. But other areas of England offer no discounts at all for young people. And young people consider that the lack of support and the variation is unfair, and they would prefer a consistent picture across England and the UK. And we saw evidence from free bus travel schemes such as that in Scotland, London, of the benefits of that. And just one example there is that the users mentioned the increased independent travel that this offered. It gave them more freedom and autonomy, and they were able to access new opportunities that they hadn't been able to otherwise. So I'll finish with that specific example, and thanks, and look forward to the rest of the presentations and the webinar.
Thanks a lot, Kiron. I also posted on the chat the link to the report, and now we go to Zahraa.
Thanks, Andrea. Cool. So wanted to take different ends of the spectrum from Kiron. We're talking about elderly demographic and specifically on-demand transport for those riders. So we're VIA. We are a a software and operations company that works with public transit agencies, cities, authorities, and councils throughout the world. Within Europe, we work with about 120 different organizations, and this spans planning of public transport networks, the delivery and operations of those services and demand-responsive transport services, as well as journey planning and things like that via a tool called Citymapper. And this is just a kind of a plethora of the different partners that we work with. It's a little bit of introduction, but typically what we specialize in and are best known for within Europe is demand-responsive transport. And we have completed about 35 million trips across Europe since we first started to expand into Europe around 2017, 2018. One of the partners that we work with is Ruter, the public transit agency in Oslo. And Oslo as a city had a very laudable and noble vision for what they wanted the city to be. And it's kind of grounded this an idea that from birth all the way through life, they want the city to be the best place to live in the world, and they want people who are born there to grow up and continue to live there and not feel kind of disenfranchised or blocked from being able to live in the city. And they had a number of different kind of areas or topics that they thought were kind of key drivers to enable that vision, one of which was transport. And what that meant was introducing a demand-responsive transport service in Oslo, and it's kind of colloquially become known as the pink bus, and you can kind of see why here, which is quite fun. And again, the kind of taking the vision of Oslo City and then transporting that into a specific goal was this idea that they wanted the elderly demographic to be able to maintain mobility and independence and access the majority of the city in which they live. And so that can be from anything in terms of like running to medical appointments, shopping, errands, and leisure trips. But people shouldn't feel like they can only access the immediate things within their vicinity, but they can go across the city and live a full and active life. So how this kind of service works, so to say, it's a demand-responsive transport service through the majority of the districts within Oslo. And essentially, to qualify for the service, passengers over the ages of 67 are able to register to use the service. They register first time, validate their age, and then they qualify to use it. So to be very, very clear, that this is entirely distinct from kind of paratransit or dial-a-ride type services, where for those passengers who can't access conventional forms of public transport because of physical or mental impairments, this service exists in complete parallel to that. So it's not intended to replace kind of traditional paratransit services or anything. It's purely age-based eligibility. Second thing to kind of be aware of, this is kind of passengers can either book via telephone or they can book via the Ruter mobile app. And so VIA provides the demand-responsive transport software, and then we are integrated with the Ruter mobile app so that you have one singular point that you can go in and then book trips and track your vehicle and do things like this. And I think generally it's a good lesson learned for these types of services. When we kind of add in technology to day-to-day transportation, what we want to make sure we never do is disenfranchise users from being able to use public transport just because they don't understand some of the intricacies of how to use technology. So there's kind of two things that we kind of strongly believe when we design these services. One, if you're kind of aiming a service at this demographic, offering telephone booking means that the majority of people can then access it very, very simply. They haven't got to understand, say, how to use an app or anything like that. They can just kind of call up and get the booking and then get updates via text message or sometimes SMS to voice that calls up. Second thing, to try and drive user engagement, the technology has to be very simple and intuitive to use, right? And so it's a key consideration in terms of the service design to make sure those two things are kind of captured when you're dealing with this demographic. In terms of booking, people can book some days in advance for where they've got a very intentional planned trip. Equally, passengers can book on demand where I want to go somewhere right now. And this has been kind of one of the, if you kind of consider how dial-a-ride or paratransit services have worked in the past. Often there's this booking cutoff where you can book some days in advance, but you can't book on the day for these types of trips, which kind of actually does impinge on people's freedom. It lacks the ability to do the spontaneous trips that people want to do. So one of the kind of big values of this service is it kind of caters for all of those different use cases. People who are very well planned in advance, and then those people who want to kind of travel somewhere on the day. And then there's about 30 vehicles, 30 of these pink buses, which are specifically adapted to facilitate mobility devices and walkers and wheelchairs. And the majority of Oslo is covered with this service. And I want to kind of take a little bit of a data-driven approach to this. What you can see on the left-hand side is this is a kind of breakdown of where residents of Oslo age 16 and above are typically living. And on the right-hand side, this kind of red zone that you can see is the area covered by Aldersvennlig, which is the kind of elderly transport service. And what you can see is the correlation here, right, where we've typically targeted the areas in terms of service design where these passengers live. So we're making sure that we're catering for that specific goal and objective which Oslo City have, to make sure that we're kind of picking off those areas. This area that we currently cover now, it covers the majority of Oslo. When we first started this years and years ago, we kind of gradually built up the service, going zone by zone, district by district, to kind of factor in these different areas of Oslo. And you can see here actually on the right hand side, we still didn't cover central Oslo. A couple of reasons. One, public transport there is exceedingly good and exceedingly accessible. Very, very easy to, for those of you who've been or live in Oslo, great city to kind of use public transport in, especially in that dense core area. Secondly, you can actually see there, again, just in terms of where elderly passengers are typically living, it's typically more on the peripheral areas rather than downtown central Oslo. And then we'll see in the future, continue to assess whether it would make sense to then move this service more into central downtown Oslo. One of the things we've seen, this is kind of a snapshot over the last sort of year or so. So this originally started off as a pilot to kind of validate the hypothesis by giving users and residents of Oslo an extremely flexible service would kind of increase the accessibility they have to use transport and navigate their way around the city. And what we've been able to see is this incredible kind of over the years, adding in additional zones, as I referenced before, but if you just look over the last sort of year, we've kind of grown patronage by about 61% month over month, which is extremely positive. And I say demonstrates the fact that if you provide even as you incorporate technology into public transportation, if you do it in a very thoughtful, calculated and targeted way, then you'll see very positive results in terms of the uptake and usage of these services. And the final thing I kind of wanted to just kind of show, is the central principle of why this service existed in the first place was specifically around how you can improve accessibility and enable elderly riders to live a full life, being able to access anything within the city, and they didn't want to create arbitrary boundaries because they can't get onto buses very easily or anything like this. What the left-hand image shows, this is we call her Jane. Jane is a mythical person that we put somewhere within the network. So here you can see it's kind of relatively central in terms of the operating area. And we're saying on the left-hand side, where can Jane go using just conventional public transit? So buses or tram or anything like that. How far within Oslo can she go when she's using this? And you can see here that this kind of builds out these concentric circles, how far she can go in 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour from where she is. And then what you can start to see more on the right-hand side is when we factor in not just the core public transport network, but you also factor in the demand responsive transport service for elderly riders, where they can go within the network is far, far greater. And so this, again, kind of validates the kind of central principle of why this service is there in the first place, which is we want elderly riders to be able to navigate safely and easily around Oslo, aligned with the city of Oslo's goals. Anyway, that's just that's one such example, as I say, of these types of services. This is I think from a VIA's perspective, in terms of services, we partner with organizations in Europe. This is the one which is really highly catered and specific around age-based eligibility. But we've seen this, similar services like this in places like France work very, very successfully, as I say, when we're very targeted and dedicated to the service design to enable eligibility, accessibility for elderly passengers. Andrea, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Samuel. Now we go to Zahraa for the last presentation. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to write them, and we will take them right after Zahraa's presentation.
Yes. Okay, let me just share this. So you can all see the screen?
Yeah,
I think so.
we can see.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect.
Okay, hello everyone. So for those who came in a little bit later, my name is Zahraa Jawad and I work as a policy advisor for the Vervoerregio Amsterdam, where I'm the PTA of Amsterdam, where I'm participating in the shared multimodal mobility for all project, which I'm going to tell you more about. So the project is also known as SMALL, and it's a 4-year project funded by the Interreg North-Sea program and led by Impact. And on the right side, you can see all the partners that are also joining the project. So what is its aim? So we all know that shared mobility like bikes, e-scooters, they are mainly used by young urban adults. And people with like reduced mobility, mostly elderly or people with a physical condition, even families and children, they are often left behind. So the aim of SMALL is to change this, and partners will invent a innovative and creative mobility solution and test this through a pilot. And we also use in SMALL and people-centered approach, which is called co-creation, where we try to understand the needs of the end users and we try to involve them from the start of the project and create mobility solutions together. Yeah, so next. So the Vervoerregio Amsterdam will carry out a pilot with a volunteer transport. So what is volunteer transport? This is a service where often volunteers, often people that are, no, it's a service where volunteers, often people that are retired, want to give back to society. So they provide one-on-one transportation for people with reduced mobility, commonly elderly. So this service has no profit motive. So it's either free or for a very small mileage-based fee. Volunteers drive them to important meeting places like doctor appointments or grocery stores. So they are really like small rides on local level. And for many elderly that are like socially isolated, it's really a chance to actually just get out of the house and to have a chat with someone and feel more connected. So it's for them really a trip. So yeah. So what is the problem analysis? Okay, where to start? So we identified some issues. Okay, I'll start from the beginning. It's all a transport organization once knocked on our door, the Vervoerregio, and they asked for subsidy because their municipality was not willing to subsidize them. You know, they have like other policy priorities. But the thing is that we have this condition where we will only subsidize them if their municipality is also subsidizing them. So we will only like support some kind of co-funding. And this was not the case. So unfortunately, we couldn't help them. And so we asked them, like, okay, what kind of issues do you encounter? And they said that a common issue for, and not only them, this was at other organizations as well, is what I call pre-travel costs. So these are the costs that cover the distance from the departure point of the volunteer to the pickup point of the passenger. So basically, the passenger is responsible for covering these costs, but is not in the vehicle yet. And then above that comes also the cost of the pickup point to whatever destination they want to go. So that means that the farther away a passenger lives, the higher the costs become for the trip. So this financial obstacle often leads to passengers dropping out. So just to like show more contrast, illustrate the difference. Like when you request an Uber, the Uber will come and pick you up and bring you to your destination, and you will only cover that cost. But because these volunteers, they have like no municipal subsidy, and they want to provide a very low fare, they also the pre-travel costs are for the passenger. They are responsible for paying that. So it's a different kind of model. Okay, so what is our pilot? So our pilot focuses on removing these financial barriers to provide equal access to volunteer transport, regardless where one lives. So instead of having the passenger pay for the volunteer's travel to the pickup location, the passenger will only cover the cost of their pickup location to their destination. Exactly like your example I just told. That's also something that makes more sense. So in our pilot, we want to work with 2 different volunteer transport organizations, each from another municipality, to create a benchmark and to see what the results are and if they differ in another context. So these are the 2 municipalities we chose. Why did we choose this? Well, the first one you see, this municipality gives no municipal subsidy to support volunteer transport organizations. And the other one does that. So that's the key difference between them. And you may ask, okay, the municipality that gives no municipal subsidy, how does these volunteer transport organization then exist? You know, how are they funded? Well, it's a very interesting model because I once interviewed them and they told me that they recruit sponsorships. So they are sponsored by a healthcare institution or banks. So that's quite interesting. So with this pilot, we actually aim to demonstrate the effectiveness of our pilot and to hope to convince the municipality to keep supporting this model, even if the pilot ends. We want to like also see if there are like certain areas that have higher demand, since it doesn't matter anymore where you live. Okay, so yeah, solutions lie in simplicity. Our pilot aims to make volunteer transport more accessible by reducing these financial barriers, especially for people in remote areas. By running these studies, like I said, we can identify regions with higher transport and demand and highlight potential needs for municipalities and local authorities. And also, beyond improving access, the pilot also helps to raise awareness about volunteer transport, but also the recruitment of more volunteers. Because they also said that during summer, like half of the volunteers, they go on vacation and they don't really have like good capacity. So at the same time, it lays the groundwork for forming partnerships with municipalities to secure long-term funding, to ensure the service continues, but also to recruit more volunteers to draw more attention on this initiative. Challenges. So, yeah, after the pilot ends, there is a risk of passengers become more accustomed to the low rates, and that can make it a little bit challenging to go back to the standard costs. And also, it may be difficult to assign volunteers more tasks. For instance, trip reporting or other administrative duties without overwhelming them. That was my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Zahraa. And now we go for the questions. So there are some questions to Samuel. Maybe the first one is, Samuel, if you know the costs for the users, and if it's integrated with the regular PT public transport services in the city, and if you know how it is financed.
Sure. So Ruter is a operating company that's co-owned by the city of Oslo and Akershus County. And so as part of their ownership, they fund Ruter. So it's kind of indirectly funded by the cities themselves through Ruter as the operating company that decides around public transport provision within the area. In terms of the individual kind of rider fares themselves, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. My knowledge fails me there, apologies. But like, it's no more expensive or cheaper than conventional bus services in the area. So like, it's not priced at a discount or a premium. It's just the same bus ticket that you would need to be able to use that service as a conventional bus service within Oslo. And then I think there was Andrea, I think there was another question.
Yeah, I think there's another one. Basically, if you notice any modal shift from elderly, from cars to the service, or if they were using already public transport and now they're using this service.
Great question. I actually I don't have that to hand. I will follow up with Ruter though and see what we can provide, and then see if we can kind of disseminate that out through the distribution list of people who attended. One thing I would say is like we have in other services where we have launched demand responsive transport either aimed at the general public or aimed at a specific demographic. We have seen very positive results in terms of that modal shift, where I think initially what you find are passengers being engaged to use public transport, whether they not used it before. So one that springs to mind is a place in the UK called Sevenoaks, where I think 25% of people who have used the demand responsive transport services never used buses before in the area. And these people had very good bus services, but actually having a different option to them encouraged them to use it. And I think the next piece then around kind of people who have foregoing using their private vehicle and swapping into demand responsive transport. Transport for West Midlands, for example, we work with them on a service in Coventry. I think the fact there's about 70% of people have reported using their private vehicle less and replacing their trips with demand responsive transport. The one around selling a car or deferring ownership of a car, I unfortunately don't have any stat off the top of my head about that one. Very interesting. It's more of a long-term thing, right? Because people don't buy cars every year, so you kind of understand like, okay, once the service is very established over a number of years, can you then point to a place where they've either sold their car or deferred a purchase of the car? I have nothing to say off the top of my head, but I think it's a very interesting question. I think very valid.
Thanks a lot, Samuel. Yeah, definitely something for us to keep an eye on. And of course, once we offer services that are more catered, maybe people will slowly make the change. Now we have a question for Kiron from Catalonia. They have fare both public transport fares for 16 under, so children under 16 don't pay, and then for young people, so under 30, they pay 40 for 3 months of use of all public transport. but they also produce a decrease in revenues, and the public finance is higher. And then Christina from Catalonia wants to know, what do you think about this policy?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, focusing on the question from Christina. Yeah, I mean, the situation we have in England is we have for older people who are retired at retirement age, 67 and above, get free local bus travel. So that's I'm not sure that I don't think that's the same in other countries. So I think that is an example, though, where for one reason or another, it's been thought that is beneficial to society to have that free bus travel for older people. I suppose I would argue that it's perhaps equally appropriate to have such a discount for young people. In fact, there are many in the older age group who economically perhaps are less needing to have free bus travel. So I think we need, and I think this is a common issue across the three presentations and across our whole public transport sector, is what I think is important when we do more is show the social value of public transport. And there's fairly limited work that I'm aware of which has systematically sought to identify the benefits, social and I mean, I'm not just social, economic, and environmental benefits, but in particular the social benefits for the users. In terms of, so for young people, it could be if it helps them with education, training, employment. It's possible to identify a monetary value if public transport makes a difference to allow that. I think if we were to do that, we would find that it would be quite good value. It would be value for money for there to be a public subsidy for cheaper or free public transport for young people. And Scotland has done some calculations, which is why they went forward with the scheme for under 22-year-olds. Apart from the social value, they also thought that it would, in the longer term, it would mean that young people would become familiar with using buses, and they were likelier to use buses when they got older. So there's also a modal shift argument in Scotland. The future generations of bus users, you're investing in those future generations if you give discount free use for young people. So that's also an economic argument, that it will cover it will financially cover itself in the long term. And I mean, I think that the arguments why subsidise also apply to the volunteers. They also apply to elderly transport, demand responsive transport as well. That I think we need to do more work to identify the benefits to the users.
Indeed, thanks, Gideon. Yeah, I don't think that it's a very straightforward question or answer. You know, how does it work? I think indeed we need to take a deeper look into this to see, because the benefits can have also a very strong impact. There's another one from you, Kiran, about the number of trips. When you say that for young adults, they travel less than other groups. And then the question is that maybe the other groups, they take more trips without thinking about them necessarily. So how do you see, like, how relevant do you think that is this comparison, either to understand quality of mobility or
that's a good comment. Good, Elizabeth has suggested. Maybe young people are they're avoiding unnecessary trips, and the rest of the population are making unnecessary, environmentally damaging trips, and young people are more rational. But I mean, what we wanted to do in our Transport to Thrive study was to to talk to young people about whether they were prevented from making trips that were important to them. This is quite hard to identify, but our research, in-depth research, plus some other research has also shown that some travel is being discouraged, and sometimes young people may not mind, but it's bad. It's perhaps not good for society if young people are interacting less, if they're socially interacting less because of transport provides a barrier. So I mean, it has been argued that the current generations, new generations of young people are more interested in tech and online activity. They may prefer to socially interact online, etc. But there are also potentially some implications of not interacting. I mean, obviously, I'm in the education sector, and we're concerned that young people they physically attend classes because it's better for them and for their whole classes. We see poorer performance when young people don't attend classes. So there's I think a lot of in-person interaction, which is important. So I maybe other age groups travel too much excessively, but I think that we see an indication that there's younger people are traveling too little.
Yes, thank you, Kiron. I think there are some subtle aspects indeed. I mean, but when it tackles transport poverty and the inability to access social life in general, I think it's very relevant. There was a question for Samuel about how the users use either the telephone or the app, and I see that 1 in 4 use the app. But then it varies also in different locations. There was another question from Kiron. Just a second, let me read. Accessibility of points of interest for young people with public transport. So did you analyze spatially where the spots with mobility poverty and are located in the UK? And are you planning to extending the public transport network in these areas?
We didn't analyze in detail for any specific geographical areas, but I would refer to DRT. Samuel was talking about DRT. I'm also doing some work in DRT in rural areas of England, and so I think this links to Samuel's presentation. What we found is surprisingly large numbers of young people are using DRT. I mean, I know the service in Oslo is only available for over 67 and over, but generally rural DRT is available to all ages in the schemes that are being tried out in England. And what we found is the proportion of young people using DRT is more than expected, and it's more than traditional bus services. So what we're finding is that there were these it's an indication of unmet demand previously, where young people are able to make point-to-point journeys using DRT, which were not possible previously. So that's something I'm also, we're doing a social value study of DRT in rural areas to look more into that.
So yeah, maybe we keep an eye on that. Samuel, I don't know if you want to add something about the telephone and app users before we close the webinar.
No, nothing much. I say I think in Oslo it's around 1 in 4 was from memory using the app. It does vary hugely from service to service. So say in London, where we work with Transport for London on their citywide paratransit scheme. There it's near 1 in 3. In other services we've got up to I think in Paris now, where we work with EDFM and PAM on their service, it's about 1 in 2, I think, now using the app. So it varies a little bit from service to service in terms of how much penetration you get with getting users to access the services via the app. Obviously, we try and help partners and users with that. So, for example, we literally launched last week in Manchester on their dial-a-ride scheme. I think the thing we're now looking to do is specific ride-alongs, for example, where we get in the vehicle and then we sit with passengers who haven't used the app because there wasn't an app before, and kind of take them through how to use the app. That can be a little labor intensive, but it's usually worth it because then you get people comfortable with using the technology and things like that going forward as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Any last question or comments before we close? I think we're very much close to the end. I think that's it. So I just want to thank very much our speakers to share the insights into their work, research, and pilots. Thank you very much. This is very valuable for our discussions. For all the participants, for the questions, for taking the time to be with us today. And just remember to check out, we're gonna share all the presentations, the recording, and a short report on this. And also feel free to share the previous public transport lab webinars that we had at the Polis website. And thank you very much for the time together. And we hope to see you all very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.